How to race multiple 70.3's in one dry season. It's a question I got asked recently by a few people following on from my 70.3 training plan, how to build in my video selection. So I thought I would firstly give a little bit of background scope into how I would approach it as an athlete and a coach, and then perhaps give you some tips and thought process to try structure your own 70.3 season looking into 2025. Now it's just about to be the Taupo World Champs in New Zealand in December, the beginning of December, and then similarly at the back end of November it's the Marbella World Champs. So if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you're going to be racing more than once, more than likely, starting from probably April time, depending where you can travel to, into May, where the summer starts. So in Europe, certainly there's multiple races every weekend. So you might be asking yourself, okay, how do I recover? What's the gain versus loss by racing every other weekend, for example, plus the travel and taking into consideration tapering, recovering, resting, and so forth. So there's quite a few things to think about. So if you're interested, you're in the right place. Hopefully I can shed some light or just refresh some of your learnings that you already know. Okay, one of the main things we try do through, I suppose, winter is we work on some gains. The problem comes in the summer season, you are mainly just refining your race skills and getting race craft and race experience back up, or it might be just your first season completely, so you don't have any history from last season. So winter's the time that you start to see the gains if you have to look at your slope of fitness, for example. Then you generally will plateau around your race because you can't keep making gains while you taper off, freshen up. If anything, the fitness starts to technically drop, but then your form, your freshness comes up. Now, the idea is you keep increasing and then hopefully peak at your key race of the season. Now that's in the textbook world. Sometimes we get illness or a niggle, and that's all part of the sport, and elites go through it, age groupers go through it. So don't stress about that because you've strung together hopefully a really good winter. So that's when you see the big gains. You race, for example, your first race of the season is often just blow the cobwebs. Make mistakes, remind yourself how to hurt again, because most of us don't really go super deep in training to get the same feeling that you get from racing. So, okay, so if that's like a textbook, peak, improve, and then peak again for a final race at the end of the season, how does that look like in terms of, if say we're going to target race 1, say that was May, race 2, July, and race 3. I'm working off hypothesis that you might be thinking about doing 2 to 3 half Ironmans. Now this is the big question mark. How should we plan that in to your calendar? I'm going to explain a little bit about recovery and actually when you do taper, what kind of happens, and the negative impact of actually getting ready for a race and how much time you actually lose versus then what you gain from the race in terms of overall fitness. So it's really hard, and professionals go through this, is to maintain your overall fitness in a race season because you're always stopping to freshen up, peak for a race, then recover. So your ebbs and flows aren't on a nice linear platform like you get through the winter. Okay, so we'll touch on those. I think that's going to be a great place to start today. So if you do kick off in May, for example, remember you're going to get taper for say 1 week, then you're going to recover for another week. It'll probably take you 7 to 10 days to recover from a 70.3, depending on how conditioned you are, but let's just assume that you're pretty fit. So you've kind of in effect lost 2 weeks when you race, which is why we race, to freshen up and then ideally recover, absorb it. So that 2 week period you've lost. Now, to get any sort of significant fitness gains, we need another week to build back in. So that's 3 weeks. And then you can start pushing in week 4. Now, if you're racing in week 6, straight away after here, you can see you're only going to get really 2 weeks of training in. Now, that's fine. You would need to really work out, okay, what are the areas that lacked in race 1? Now, it could be race sharpness, so speed. It could be lack of heel work for the upcoming race in July. It could have been, it's more than likely going to be open water practice, your lack of, because of the time of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. So it's about getting into warmer waters, getting in groups. So there's your swimming taken care of, and perhaps racing, sort of practicing a little bit more around race intensity on the swim. The bike, it might be just leg conditioning for those long, 20 to 30 minute blocks that you haven't quite put in because the weather's been super bad or you've been on the turbo trainer the whole time. So what you've got to consider, there might be 6 to 8 weeks between races, but actually only getting really 2 weeks of increase of fitness before you taper again. So you've got a choice here. You either roll through the first race and don't really freshen up and taper, so it doesn't take so much out of you and you don't need a recovery week. When you're really fit, and professionals do this, they'll train through a race and you'll be a little bit off. You're racing about 85%, but you might surprise yourself because the pressure's off, which means you don't miss a beat and you actually start going pretty good come July time, and then you do a proper taper. So that needs to be a decision with you, and for example, sit down with the coach, or life may dictate that you're not as fit as you would like to be kind of come March, April. You need to be really doing quite a bit of work to race in May super well. Okay, so say you're fine with that, and then you've got a long time between this race 2 and race 3. Let's say it's in September. You're not going to World Champs, which is November time. You've found a nice one in Greece or nice part of France that you want to do really well. So it's a combination of the fitness you've gained through winter, the learnings you've hopefully come away with from your 2 half Ironmans, and now you want to do a meaningful 8-week block. Okay, bear in mind the last 2 weeks you really get zero effect of fitness gains. You just want to stay fresh, sharpen up, and improve your racecraft. But if there's an 8-week block between those 2 races, there's a good bit of chunk of work you can be doing in 6 weeks. Most people can get really fit in 6 weeks. So now you've got a good base. You can really hammer home quite a bit of volume, because the body loves endurance sport, especially 70.3 and Ironman. If you increase your volume, now you've progressed and hopefully have maintained niggle on illness, you've blown out the cobwebs. You in the gym, maintaining your strength in the gym, not trying to make any gains with heavy loading, you're just maintaining. That could look like, for example, if you look at some of my other videos, it could look like just doing 4 to 5 sets of 5 reps, really heavy, but not enough to give you DOMs, and we're not trying to get strength gains at sort of 8 to 10 reps. Okay, so have a little look on that on the separate video. So here you're going to really work on the learnings and any things that you've missed out. So it could be you need to do 6 weeks of some VO2 long efforts, for example, on the bike, lots of hilly tempo runs on the run for your brick training, because that type of tempo zone 3/zone 4 running is really good for 70.3 training, and you might have not been able to do it in the first race block, the long extended 15 to 30 minute blocks of running required if you're going to run well off the bike in September. So let's just look at the recovery process after 4 to 7 hour half Ironman event for most people. So we've done the build, and then you've done what you would call hard effort, maybe in the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you've focused, you've got the race coming up. You taper. So say that's 1 week. You wouldn't really taper for 2 weeks for a half Ironman. It's just too long. You'll be quite stale by the time. And then you race, and then you transition. Okay, so in essence, that takes quite a lot of mental energy, mental capacity, and bear in mind you've run pretty hard for 13 miles, 21 Ks, and a good rule of thumb is a day for every mile run, so 13 days, 13 miles, to kind of properly recover from a half marathon. That's a running rule that we like to use in the running world only. Bear in mind you've ridden here, so you don't run as hard off the bike. It's just not as much muscular damage. So that's why people can bounce back pretty well in 10 days. It really depends on you individually and how well you eat straight after the race and the 3 days after that. That's going to be key. So post-race. All right, so that's hydration. And it's not just straight after having a beer. It's at least 2 to 3 days. Sleep. Sleep quietly. And diet. Okay. So that's really going to affect your recovery to bounce back for the next race. So start thinking about that before you start building again. I wouldn't go straight back into hard training. That's another mistake most of us make, is they go, oh, I've done a race, I'm going to go back in. Things are tight. Things, certainly as older athletes, 45, 50, ankle mobility, thoracic mobility, hip mobility just drops down. You've been hunched over a bike for 2.5+ hours. You also pushed it quite here. You would have neglected the small things, the basics that I go on about. Tapers quite frantic. Race week, there might have been some travel here as well. Never underestimate the stress that travel gives you. Different beds, different diet, different climate. Aeroplanes, trains, lugging your bike bag, tweaking your back, neglecting the small things because you're away from home. You might have forgot your foam roller. You maybe not drinking as much fresh water. You certainly might have stop drinking electrolytes, anything, multiple reasons why this is quite stressful. And the nerves of pre-race, you want to perform, you want to do well, you want to do better than next time. You want to do better than previous. And it might be your first time, so you are nipping it. Okay, so just relax. It's a long training day. Unless you're there to win the race, there's only about 3 or 4 people racing it. So try not treat it as a race. Try treat it as something for yourself that you're really trying to personally achieve the best on the day. And to do that, you've got to believe in yourself, look back at the evidence of the training. And I touch on that on some of my other videos, but your self-belief, your positive self-talk is all inside you, and that's how you build confidence from race to race. So by the time you hit your 3rd race, potentially, or 2nd of the season, as long as there's been sufficient amount of time to transition and hold back, some people can do it this way, and I'll show you now on the next board. Another scenario is using the first race and getting a super compensation from that, which you get around about 2 weeks later. Now, you could go pretty well on race 2 straight away afterwards, but then you would have to go into a really sort of recovery mode of potentially 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, so that was another scenario, and then you could do one more build of 6 weeks here, and then race 3. That's quite a nice way of doing it. So training race, super compensation, try perform here, nice active mental and physical, real good recovery, and then that's 6 weeks of build. So you've got about 9 weeks between races because you want to spend that last week freshening up. That's another way of tackling your 70.3. I would say that's more for experienced athletes that kind of can listen to their body really well. beginners, I wouldn't do that. You just take so much longer to recover between 6-7 hours of racing. In summary, priority number 1 is active recovery straight away. Try not to have any time off. In terms of like the first 3 days is very light. Okay, that's after your first event. You want to then try and get straight back on the wagon, because if you allow your body to recover, that's absolutely fine. But if you completely take time off, you'll find it so hard to get back anywhere near your frequency and your routine, first of all, let alone trying to push power on the bike or run pace. So if you have 3 days of really good active recovery, and then about 6 to 10 days, I would just do this all steady zone 2. Now that would be volume dictated by previous build. Okay, so what does that mean? If you're doing 12 hours a week in your previous build, over these next 2 days, over these next 6 to 10 days, I wouldn't do any intensity. I would just do it all zone 2 at the same volume, thereabouts within an hour or 2 of what you were doing in your biggest week building to that half Ironman. So you're not putting your body under stress. You're used to the volume, first of all, but you are going truly steady, real zone 2. So you can have a conversation. So quite a lot of social riding, very easy running, and of course, time in the water as well. I would also hit the gym. Why? You're going to get a really nice hormone response. You're going to get a nice anabolic stress, which is low heart rate, really good for the hormone, male and female. And of course, you lose strength in the taper, plus the race, if you can read that. Okay, so your body mass, muscle mass will drop down because you're doing quite a big endurance session. So I would tackle that, then see how you feel. And the key takeaway is, guys and girls, is listen to your body. Now that comes with experience and age and racing experience. If you've got niggles, don't try to jump back on the wagon and train very hard. It's worth spending a little bit of money on potentially getting some soft tissue work, maybe just getting an MRT at the physio, a nice all over muscle check imbalances. We all have muscle imbalances, even if you potentially use a chiropractor. Just iron out any asymmetry if you can, because then once you get back up, you've really maintained the volume, 10, 12, 14 hours a week of training in a steady zone 2. Then you don't increase the volume, you just start to bring back some intensity, and you can then build for your next race. I think that's a pretty safe way of doing it. Hit me up any questions around this as usual. I'll try my best to answer them. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you or find out for you. Feel free to watch some of my other videos if you've just stumbled upon this one. They'll be great. Drop me a message on Instagram and we can connect. Okay, see you at the races.